So we're going to cover what you should or could inspect your inspector inspect and what he might not inspect. Now, there are all types of criteria, and so every state is different, and state licensing is different, and you know, ASHI is an organization, and there's other ones, and so they all have, you know, what the inspector is supposed to do and what he doesn't have to do or not required to do. And so I don't know. We're going to go over this list because some of it um, might be questionable. But so, obviously, the inspector is supposed to inspect the structural components of the home. If you see the foundation framing, and if the wood's rotted, they should probe it, make sure it's not rotted out from moisture or bugs. You know, they're not required to probe it, okay? But, maybe the probe will damage the wood and they're afraid to do it. But at least they should feel it and touch it and maybe tell you why it's rotted or why it's deteriorated. They should also describe what they see. Is it a crawl space or a slab? And, is it the ceiling joist or 2x10s? And is there a truss system? So, describing what they see. And I don't know, you know, inspecting and describing, you know, um, are part of an inspection. Okay, whether you need to know that you have a truss system or not, you might want to know if the truss system's moldy, right? But so they're not required on the structural components to, provide any engineering or any architectural, okay, and offer an opinion as the adequacy of any structural system or component. In other words, they can't say, well, that deck looks like it can hold, uh, a hot tub, or you know what I mean, or the floor is deflected because there's a library. So they aren't required to do that, and but they should at least say we do recommend getting a second opinion from a structural engineer, especially if they see there's a hot tub on a deck and the deck is deflecting, right, and the joists below it are cracked. They actually, you could just say, look, it's failing. But yeah, they should recommend somebody else to look at that. As far as the exterior of the building, obviously any exterior wall covering, flashing trim, doors, decks, balconies, steps, porches, railings, eaves, soffits, fascia, things like that they could see. And then even stuff like grading or vegetation, especially, if the vegetation is growing and causing problems, or big trees are hanging over the house, they should at least tell you about that. If the grading is poor, when the gutters overflow, the water runs towards the house. And so they should basically inspect all that, okay? Especially if it's accessible. They're not required to move things. So, if there's a garage and it's full of boxes, they're not going to move the boxes. So if you're going to have an inspection scheduled and you notice that the basement's 100% full, you may want to make sure that it's made available and accessible when you have it looked at. Now, they're not required on the exterior to inspect screens, shutters, awnings, seasonal items, fences. And here's the thing with some of that. Sometimes shutters are big and they look like you're going to fall down and hurt somebody. I think they should tell you about that. Okay, even though they're not required to, I think that would be important. If the house, has a big fence and it's their fence and it was installed on somebody else's property and it's obvious, they should at least say, hey, look, you need to check out to make sure your fence is on your property. I mean, if you buy a house and you find out that you have encroachments, you kind of wanted to know that. And if the home inspector is capable of at least seeing something potentially that can change your mind about purchasing the home or making decisions, I think they should tell you about it, whether they're required to do it or not. Geological or hydrological conditions, no, they're not required to do that, but, a seasoned home inspector will walk up to a house and say, whoa, there's no trees on that hillside in your backyard going down to the creek. And he'll say, but your neighbor's got trees. And he could say something like, well, I don't know, but it looks like something's going on here with landsloughing, erosion. And wow, they planted grass and ivy there. You might want to get a geotechnical engineer's opinion here because it looks like you're losing your land here and your house could go down the hill. Well, he's not required to do that. So why would you have somebody inspect the house and he sees that and he's not smart enough to be able to pick up on that? So on that note, I think that you want to make sure that whoever you hire or employ, maybe he's not going to, you're requiring him to be an engineer, or he's not going to do soil borings, and he's not going to check for land slough, and he's not going to go to the soil books and check out the topograph of the area, and he's not going to interview neighbors and look up lawsuits, and he's not going to do any of that. But at least he could say, man, there's something wrong here, and he better be smart enough to be able to see that. So a seasoned home inspector would see that. And also outbuildings. I mean, you're buying a farmhouse and then the barn happens to be 4 times bigger than a farmhouse, but the whole interior is collapsing. It might cost you 30 grand to take down that barn. You kind of want to know that, and even though he's not an engineer, if he's seasoned and he inspected hundreds and thousands of homes, not hundreds to thousands of homes, he would like, man, there's a serious issue with these walls in the basement of this barn. You better get some guy out here look at this. And that's the same with seawalls. I mean, what if you're inspecting this beautiful house, and you got a small backyard, and there's a cliff back there, and there's no beach, and the water's just blasting away. And you can see how you're losing land. There's no seawall or break wall, or there's erosion. A seasoned home inspector knows that he's been doing this for long enough that he knows that area, and he knows these problems that occur in this particular geographical area. He's going to say, man, dude, you better check into this because they're not going to let you fill that in. You can't fix it this way. You can't do that. You can't get a truck back there. There's been a problem for the last 30 years here. And you may save somebody, from buying a home. So they're not required to do this, but I would make sure your inspector at least is knowledgeable, to at least say, hey, look, man, get a second opinion on this and bring it up. Roof systems. Well, obviously the roof covering and the drainage and flashing and skylights and chimneys, roof penetrating. You got to check all that. And it's described, it is a flat roof and it has rubber roofing, and that's all great. I mean, it looks good. It makes reports look pretty with pictures, but you want to know what the problem is with the roof. So make sure he doesn't miss any of that. But he's not required, to inspect things like the antenna. Well, interiors of flues or chimneys, you know, um, and anything like that. Okay, inside chimneys and fireplaces. And usually, he should at least say, hey, look, that fireplace is falling apart. And he's going to tell you about that because it's obvious. And he'll be able to tell you, hey, look, there's no flue here, and there's fireplaces. There's only one chimney and one flue and two fireplaces. So they're going to probably pick up on something like that. But they're not going to tell you, hey, look, man, your house is located within 200 feet of high tension wires, and you got three antennas. You're at the top of the hill of this city, and you're getting blasted with all this frequency. You might want to think about this. He's not going to tell you about that, and he doesn't have to. But, maybe he's smart enough to know that, yes, this could be an issue, and at least let you know about it so you put that into your mind and back your mind about this potential condition. Okay, I'm just using that as an example. Plumbing, they should tell you about the distribution system, drains, waste, water heating equipment, venting, fuel storage, drainage, sub pumps. They should describe, what kind of water's in a well, and all that good stuff. But what they don't have to tell you on plumbing is, the washing machine connections. Now, you know what? That's a problem because they should at least look at it. I've had a client once, it wasn't my client, but they bought the house and they washed clothes and they never went down the basement and a drain was disconnected, and they flooded their basement. Okay. And so you want to make sure that they're connected. And so I would say, yeah, look at that. Interior flues. Well, you know what? If it's a 1920s house and the bricks are falling apart and there's no flue there, it's not rocket science. You need to have somebody run a camera through and check it and put a flue liner in, and hopefully the inspector tells you about it, but he's not required to. Wells, well pumps, water storage, water conditioning system, solar, fire, lawn sprinkler system, and private septic system. So they're really not required to do any of that. But you know what? What's the biggest expense of of a home that's got an old septic system? Man, it's $30,000. He's not required to do it, and maybe you didn't know you had one. At least he could say, listen, you got a septic system. It's already 45 years old. They put an addition on this house. I mean, they added 2 more rooms to this old system, and it looks like it's one of these 3 tank systems. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure this is a good system. Maybe it's not big enough. And seriously, you need to evaluate this system before you move on, because you may not be able to fix this system, and it might cost you 30 grand. So even though he's not required to, he should at least know about obvious things and at least tell you about it. As far as wells, that's another one. I mean, you buy a house, like, oh, we have a well, great. He should at least say, look, you got to check this water. Make sure there's no bacteria. You buy a house, you find out there's arsenic in the water, bacteria. So, at least, he should say, man, that water smells pretty bad. It smells like sulfur. Put that in a report. Hey, you really should have that checked out. Maybe you need a filtration system. Maybe you need to test the water for a parameter test or whatever. Or maybe it's near farmland, and there's other issues, as far as from farming runoffs and things like that. So I think that it's important for them to look at that. Maybe not inspect it, but at least warn you and tell you what's going on. Electrical. Well, obviously the service drop, conductors, cables, raceways, is it grounded, electrical box service, protection breakers, outlets, are they properly wired, or three-way lighting? They're going to do all that, okay? But what they're not required to do, and they should describe it, 100 amps, right? But, and report on it. And what they're not required to do is, remote control devices, alarm systems, low voltage wiring, ancillary wiring systems, outside wiring, measuring amperage voltage or impedance, dirty voltage, things like that. But let me give you an example here. Low voltage, okay? Hey, some of these houses in the late 60s and 70s had low voltage wiring, okay? And the low voltage wiring they used back then for the lights isn't the same low voltage wiring today. So you really can't find the relay switches. So you buy a house built in 1968, and the addition in the house is low voltage, and the new addition is regular wiring. But he wasn't smart enough to figure out that the switches were low voltage. He wasn't smart enough to figure out that there is a low voltage panel somewhere in the attic. He probably was trying to find out why there's one button, that controls all the lights, because he did not know about low voltage. So I think low voltage needs to be not necessarily evaluated, but I think that the low voltage at least should be brought up to and say, hey, you need an electrician to come on and check out this low voltage. And a lot of times they'll test lights in a low voltage home, and they'll document that the light's not working. Oh, the light's not working. Need a new light bulb. No, man, it could be a relay switch up an attic that you can't get a part for because the wires are different. 2 and 3 wire systems, they're not the same now and what they were back then. As far as alarm system, oh well, I don't expect him to check that. And any other wiring outside. I mean, if there's wiring that's like you're going to trip on, or it's going through a pond, at least they should tell you about that. The wiring outside, maybe you could have a landscaper or electrician check it out. Heating. Well, obviously, they should tell you what kind of energy you're using, what kind of furnace, maybe how old it is, things like that. What they don't have to tell you is the flues. We talked about that, and heat exchanger, the humidifier and dehumidifiers, electronic air cleaners. And, a lot of times these humidifiers leak, right? And so they should at least say, look, man, this thing's all rusted. This thing's leaking. That means it's dirty. You got ducts dirty. That means the pan could be dirty. You could have stuff growing in there. So they should at least tell you about that. That's a leak. If the air cleaner's not working, you're not going to find parts for that. Okay, so at least he should tell you, hey, look, this air cleaner is missing, parts to it. It looks like you need to do some duct renovation to get a filter in there, whatever. So I think they should look at that, tell you about it. I think they don't have to do combustion analysis, but you know what? they shouldn't be checking for carbon monoxide with the little carbon monoxide detector at the vent. They'll go to a vent, put that thing, say, "Oh, it looks good." They don't know that, and usually they're not going to be able to tell if there's a problem, and they can't tell if you got it correct heat exchanger without dismantling it. So if they're going to do combustion, then they really need to do combustion properly. They should be certified, have a certified combustion analyzer. They got to drill a hole in the flue, check the draft, and now we're getting a whole different animal, right? And so, he's probably going to open himself up to a lot of liability, but in a second, he'll probably save people's lives. I mean, I used to test combustion for over 30 years, and I went through a lot of combustion analyzers, and they're always like back then are 2,000, 3,000 bucks. I bet you I went through 5 or 10 of these things in my time, and I used to drill holes and test it, and and I was very enthusiastic about it. And when we really had problems with a lot of furnaces, now the newer furnaces today are higher efficient. We don't have as many problems with that, and so most furnaces today, are draft induced, high efficient. I'm not drilling holes in plastic pipes because what happens is then they leak from condensation. So even though I've been doing this for 40 years, maybe I'm getting lazy. I'm not doing it anymore. So I'm not doing the combustion, but I think that a nice new home inspector, should have a combustion analyzer. He should take a class on it. And if he sees rust stains or potential problems with the furnace, there's a lot of anomalies that can be picked up. There's a lot of forensic visual observations that can be done. I mean, if the water heater flue is all rusted, then you know that it's spilling. That's not good. And you have incomplete combustion, you get carbon monoxide, right? Or if the room in your apartment has a furnace and a water heater, and there's no makeup air going to the attic, and the doors aren't solid. I mean, he should tell you about that. There's not enough combustion air, and so they're not required to do any of that. But you know what? You need to have an experienced inspector, at least if he sees that. And I'll tell you what, back in my days, I used to find 1 or 2 houses a month that were dangerous. Okay, whether there was combustion air, not enough makeup air, or there was impingement, or there was issues with ventilation, okay, or there's heat transfer issues. These are all problems that can cause carbon monoxide. Air conditioners, well, yeah, they should check and see if it works, if it leaks, what kind of energy, they're not required to check electronic air filters, which is kind of tough. And, unless they're good, they could look at it. And of course, cooking supply or distribution. So, but you know what? Here's an example. Somebody puts a new kitchen in, and they got this huge fan, this commercial fan. And a good home inspector, like, whoa, man, when you turn on that fan, it's going to suck your house. And let's say someone's taking a shower, and the windows are closed, and the air conditioner's on, and you're preparing a dinner, and this fan is sucking out 300 CFM, cubic feet per minute outside, right? And there's a garbage bag next to your water heater. It's an old water heater. So now someone's taking a shower, the water heater kicks on, the fan's sucking the air out of the house. Guess where the air's coming? It's coming down that water heater vent, and it's causing spillage of the flame, and now you start a house fire. So yeah, they should look at that and say, man, that's a huge fan. That can cause negative pressure. You better make sure there's a window open. And a seasoned home inspector will see that. See, it's all about that seasoned home inspector or the seasoned inspector. Anybody can read a book, take a test, get a state license, and go in a house and follow the rules and be covered. But they're not doing you just, because anybody can look at a furnace and say, oh, the serial number on this furnace is da 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 da. It's a gas furnace. It has an air cleaner. And according to the serial number, it's 11 years old. Who cares, man? Who cares, right? And so you don't need to pay somebody for a who cares report. So it's about who does the work. Even though they're not required to do these things, I'm giving examples where it's pretty important that they at least look at it and tell you about it. So, they're not required, to do some stuff like that. Now, as far as interior, obviously, walls, ceilings, floors, steps, rails, countertops, cabinets, garage doors, openers, all important stuff, right? But what they're not required to do is paint the paint. Now think about this in the wallpaper. So wait, now they don't have to tell you about this, but you move in and you start pulling the wallpaper, it's vinyl wallpaper, and there's mold behind there. Well, a good seasoned home inspector say, wait a minute, there's an exterior wall, You got brick, it's on a southern exposure, and you've got vinyl wallpaper, and through vapor diffusion, you're going to get mold behind here because it's just not a good design. An interior vapor barrier in cold climate zone in Ohio is not going to work. So at least you say, hey, this wallpaper, you take it down, it might have mold behind there. Well, a seasoned home inspector might know that, but he's not, a normal home inspector, not. Paint, that's another one. So you got old windows, like, oh, these old windows are great. But he failed to tell you, wait a minute. These windows are from 1922. His client's holding two little kids in their hand, under age of 6, and she's pregnant. And what he should be telling us, wait a minute, honey, look, this paint here is pre 1978, and it's a high probability that all this dust and chips in the window wells contains lead. And when you open these windows, it's going to contaminate your floors. And look, these carpets are 40 years old. They've been opening these windows in here. You might really want to check this house for lead. And this is where you would, maybe think about getting replacement windows, especially if you are a woman in childbearing age, or you're going to have kids under age of 6, or even anybody, pre 1978. So I would say even though he's not a lead inspector, I'm thinking, maybe he should tell you about it. Carpeting, window treatment, central vacuum. Them old vacuum systems don't work. At least you could say, hey, there's pieces missing to the vacuum cleaner, ain't going to work. So if you go through the house and you see little vacuum cleaners in all the closets and the central vacuum system doesn't have any hoses, then the thing don't work. And maybe people want to know that, household appliances too, so, I think you should make sure that the stove has an anti-tipping device. I mean, you don't have to check the microwave to see if it leaks microwaves, but you can check the door and seal, and if you're missing buttons and things like that. So I don't know. They should at least talk about it. Insulation. Well, they're supposed to. This is what they're supposed to inspect. I don't think they know what they're doing, but they're supposed to inspect vapor retarders and unfinished spaces. They should look at that, right? Vapor retarders. So you got vapor retarders and you got vapor barriers, and it's all about permeating, right? Most inspectors, maybe they don't know the difference. So that's something that is kind of typical. The use of vapor retarders and vapor barriers is very difficult. You kind of got to know some building science, but they're required to inspect that. So hopefully they know what they're doing. Ventilation to attics and foundations, they should know that. That's another one of these difficult things, like, how many square feet of venting do I need for crawl space? Am I cross ventilating my attic because I have roof vents, soffit vents, and I have gable vents, and a automatic fan? So they need to know a little bit about the building science of the home, and they are required to inspect that. Mechanical venting systems, and they should describe. What they're not required to do is disturb insulation, vapor retarders, and determine indoor air quality. So, okay, for sure. But, if you walk in a house and it smells like mold, and you start sneezing, and everyone starts sneezing, you better tell the people, hey, you better figure this out, because there's some interstitial dew point condensation problem happening somewhere here. I mean, you could have an eaves leak, or you could have hardy board issues. You could have those front entrances that have improper foundations, all that. Okay. And so if you walk in the front door, man, whatever you smell, that's when you're going to smell it. If you smell mold and mildew right when you walk in the front door, we need to be looking for something to see what's causing it. Now, vapor retarders are different, and vapor barriers are different depending on where you live. And I'll tell you what, these siding people and these foundation people, a lot of them screw that up, okay? And that's why we have all these problems, okay? So, I happen to be a building science guy, so I'm totally into conditioned crawl spaces, and I'm into all that. But a lot of home inspectors don't know about it. But you want to interview them, because this is where it's important to get a seasoned guy. You want a guy, if you're somewhere, I don't know where you're going to be inspecting it, but you want a guy that's been doing this for 20, 30 years. And the more certifications, even if they're not up to date, like I used to have all these licenses. Asbestos, I dropped it. Radon, I dropped it. Pest, I still have that one. I dropped, all my certifications. I had, building code certs. I had indoor air quality certs. I had all that stuff, because it was like, bragging rights to have all that. But I don't have all that now, but I still know about it. So you want to get somebody that's been around for a while, that has done a lot of inspections, especially in your area. So, like, if I moved to Arizona, I might not be as good of an inspector as somebody down in Arizona because I don't know about scorpions. You know what I mean? And they have drywood termites, and I know about subterranean termites. So I would say, somebody that knows the area that you're buying in, and knows the soil types and the weather types. They're not required to inspect disturb insulation. So that just means they're not going to walk in your attic if there's no flooring. Okay. And you know what? I don't blame them. I don't do that either. I used to when I was younger, like you try to find, but the problem is inspectors fall through the ceilings, man, or they disturb the insulation, then they cause thermal bridging issues. And so no, if there's no flooring, they're not going to go up there and disturb it. They're not going to move it. But let's say they're in a basement crawl space and it smells like mold, and they're in the ground and they're in the northeast corner and there's insulation around the band joist. You know what? They should take a stick and move that and see if there's mold back there or rot back there, especially if there's carpenter ants. So yeah, I would say they could disturb it if necessary just to help identify conditions. Okay. Fireplaces, solid fuel burning appliances. Yeah, they should look at the components, venting systems, flues that are accessible, chimneys, that describe. They're not required to do interiors of flues, fire screens indoors, seals and gaskets, automatic fuel feed devices, mantles, fireplace surrounds, combustion makeup air devices, heat distribution. They shouldn't ignite and extinguish fires, okay? Determine if there's draft. But you know what? Okay, here's an example. So they look at the fireplace and they walk in the house and the house smells like firewood. That's a problem because now you know that the heating system is causing negative pressure. And so that fireplace can have a negative draft, which is a problem because you make a fire at night and the fire goes down low. And then in the morning, you got dust all over your house because the fire extinguished itself overnight. And then the heating system caused negative pressure, and then the fireplace became a makeup air system, and then you can't figure out why there's always dust in the house. And so I do a lot of case studies where people can't figure out where the dust is coming from, and yeah, it could come from that. So if you see that the fireplace is stained, from smoke, or the house smells like firewood, or there's a dust issue, at least they should tell you. And hey, we need to again, we need to evaluate this and check it out. Okay. And then makeup air devices. This is all stuff I kind of talked about a little bit about. Okay. And yeah, they're not going to put out fires. One of the biggest things I get is I walk in, oh, we want to know if the gas fireplace lights. I'm like, oh, really? And so in a brand new house, yeah, I want to check it because sometimes it causes odors, and other things. But if you could see that they've been burning it for a while, sometimes I don't turn those things on. I mean, I look at them. I mean, what's the worst case? You need new logs or you need a new burner. I mean, you're talking $400-500 maximum, right? So yeah, I'm not sure they need to. And a lot of times, if there's a problem with it and it's dirty, it's not clean, and they light it and it starts a fire, they forget about it, they forget to turn it off, they leave the house, and who knows? They're just asking for trouble. So I would say that would be something maybe I wouldn't do. Okay. And so, so there's basically, inspectors should inspect what they could see. We went over most of them. I mean, sure, there's exclusions. They don't have to. I mean, why things happen. Like, for example, here's an example. You go in a house, everything's fine. And inspector says, oh, front yard's nice. But then he doesn't say that, look, the soil's depressed a bit, and they used to have 3 trees here. And why they remove the trees? And then you go to the basement, there's a new clean out, and you can see some flood marks and some stuff in the crawl space that have stains on them from flooding. And he could say, wait a minute, there was a tree root issue here. You need to ask the homeowners, and you might want to run a camera because it's possible that tree broke them pipes, and you might have to deal with this down in the future because look, they already snaked the drains. They put a new clean out in. Look, you got a new clean out here, and they were snaking the gutters. Look, they put a clean out on this gutter. Why they do that? And so these are things that they don't have to do, but that'll, if somebody buys a house and they find out they got to put a whole new sewer in, and there were signs of potential problems with it that could have been at least brought up during the inspection, that would have been very beneficial. And again, that's a seasoned guy. Another one would be, they walk in the house and they notice that all the ceilings are fixed in the bedrooms, and look, they paint, the stucco's been done, and they're like, oh, that was a roof leak, we got a new roof. No, maybe not. Maybe it's an ice problem. And maybe the gutters fall down all the time. And maybe that water's getting into the ductwork underneath the house. So yeah, sure, there's a lot of exclusions, and um, it's all about getting your seasoned guy wherever you're at. And every city has at least a guy like me, or better than me, or close. You just got to do your homework. Do not take your realtor's advice. Period. Do not do that. Realtors, like inspectors, that don't cause problems, okay? Because they want their commission check. And then if something does happen, that realtor is going to throw that inspector under that bus so fast. It's not going to be funny. They're going to throw that inspector right underneath the bus. And so, I would say I might not use an inspector that was referred. I might try to go on the internet and do some research, maybe have friends, and you don't want some new guy. You want somebody that's been doing it. I would say at least minimum 5,000 inspections under his belt, minimum. A lot of inspectors my age have done close to 15 to 20,000. The older guys have been doing it, for decades. Pretty much, they may not do everything. They may not climb on your roof. Okay. I don't climb roofs. Okay. If I have to, I will, but I don't climb. I can look at that roof and say, man, that roof's on borrowed time. I go in the attic. Look, you got 2 layers on there. Oh, you got a moisture problem. You got poor ventilation. I might not be able, I may say, oh, you need to tuck point your chimney, but I may not be able to see the flashing. But I'm going to say the flashing's old anyways, because that roof is 19 years old. It needs to be replaced. It's on its last quarter of life. So if it leaks, it leaks. Plus, if it does leak, you're going to see moisture stains and mold and stuff in the attic, right? So you got to pretty much, if you're not going to climb a roof, then at least you got to know what you're looking for. A lot of inspectors just bring a ladder and run up and down that roof with their little camera, and I don't know if they need to do that, but then they'll miss the stuff we've been talking about the whole time, right? So, anyways, I do have a service. If you Google call Marko with a question, Google call Marko with a question, Marko, it'll prompt you to a fee. Usually I can solve a house problem, or at least advise on whatever, 15 to 20 minutes. You can send me photos sometimes, or correspondence, or sometimes FaceTime. Some investors call me up and we go FaceTime, and they're looking at a foundation wall crack while they're there, if they want to bid on the house. And so I have that service. I also have, I'm an Amazon affiliate, so I might have a couple products. I'm not sure. When I do a video, I try to find something to put on there that might relate to the video. I do make like 1% on that. So, hey, if you want to buy something from Amazon, just go into one of my affiliate things, and you could punch in what you want. That'd be great, if you buy off of me. Also, I have some merch in my store section, and if you got any ideas what else I could put in there, that'd be great. You could make comments. Please rate, share, subscribe. And then if you can't figure out problems, or you want a second opinion on a bid, or you want me to evaluate something, and even sometimes people want a report and they want me to be a distance expert, they'll send me stuff and I'll write a whole report of what I think. Sometimes a lot of these problems can go away quickly with just the report. So I do charge a little more than that. But anyways, hey, thanks for coming on. Please rate and subscribe.